In today's show, we have another of our popular TNT Dynamite Conspiracy episodes where we talk about a number of different conspiracies and ask, are any of them actually true? And in today's show, we discuss, was Princess Diana's death an accident or was she murdered? We also discuss who was responsible for the poisoning of Alexander Litvinenko, the former KGB operative. Also, we discuss, did Jesus and Mary Magdalene marry and actually have children? And finally, we touch on, was British Prime Minister Harold Wilson a Soviet spy?
And now, the TNT Talk Show, daring to go where other podcasts fear to tread.
Hello, I'm Tony Fasulo, and I share the stage with my esteemed friend and colleague, Tayo Boya. Tayo, hello, my friend. Once again, I hope you're keeping safe and well.
Yeah, what the hell, Tony? What you gonna do, eh? What you gonna do? As you know my favorite aphorism, don't you? The lucky ones die first. Well, there we are. The other day, no, seriously, I've been doing some research, if you like, because I completely forget how I happened upon this, completely by accident. And I started asking people. Now, I'm going to ask you a question, and I hope you're going to be honest.
Go on.
And it could be that your honesty would land you in some degree of embarrassment. And obviously, you don't want to admit something embarrassing, to the world.
So now I'm really wary.
So, well, what the reason I'm going this way is to say, well, in that case, just edit it out, okay?
Okay.
But it's just part of this research I'm doing, because I'm asking people and I'm getting a very strange answer back. And the question is this: do you have any holes in your underwear?
Any holes in my underwear? Just where my legs go.
Ah, right. Okay. So
has that thrown you somehow?
It has, because most people say no, they don't have holes in their underwear. Okay. And that's the answer that I've been getting, which is really strange. Because I then wonder, how the hell do you put on your underwear? But apparently you've
answered that one correctly.
You've answered that one correctly. And the other thing that I've been researching,
there's actually 3 holes in underwear, and most people actually, if they have different briefs, they actually have 4, because you've got 1 in the top to actually get them through, and then you've got the 2 for your legs, and then you have the 1 for for when you need to go to the toilet.
I think we'll just stop there, Tony. It's okay with
you. Some people take it as holes in their underwear, meaning shabby underwear.
I think most normal people, I've been asking, most normal people do, but you obviously are quite an abnormal person. The other thing I wanted to, have you ever smelled mothballs, by the way? Have you ever smelled mothballs?
I haven't, no. I can't say that I have.
Okay, well, in that case, I shan't continue that. A lot of people say they have smelled mothballs.
Right.
And I always wonder how the hell they get their little legs apart, but obviously, in your case. So you're laughing. I can't believe you're actually laughing. And it's really disappointing. It's really disappointing that you're laughing, because that's one of my wife's
jokes.
Yes, that's one of my wife's jokes, and you didn't laugh at mine.
Maybe you should hand over the baton to her and make her come up with these.
Well, let's see. That's it. The last one, then we can crack on with what we're here for. This one is one of mine, and I'm sure you're going to love it. What's red and isn't there?
What's red but isn't there?
Correct.
Don't know.
No tomatoes.
Oh. I think I prefer your wife's jokes better.
I love my jokes.
Anyway.
You can't fault the logic, man, can you?
Oh, dear Lord. It's terrible. Come on, let's get back on point and let's discuss again why we're here. We've got one of our Dynamite Conspiracy episodes, and we've got a number of things we're going to try and get through, obviously time permitting, of course, I'll read them out for the benefit of our listeners, but obviously if we can't get them all in, then we will try and do them on a subsequent show. The first one is, was Princess Diana's death an accident or was she murdered? The second one again is, who was responsible for the poisoning of Alexander Litvinenko, who was an ex-KGB operative who had defected to the UK. Then a third one, again, if we've got time, did Jesus and Mary Magdalene marry and have children? Interesting one. And finally, if we do have time, was British Prime Minister Harold Wilson a Soviet spy? So starting off, Tayo, with the first one, was Princess Diana's death an accident or was she murdered? Do you want to kick things off?
Not particularly, and I'm so glad you've forgotten something, but not particularly. Oh. I'm really surprised we're even discussing this, because I've got a very strong feeling that we're both of the same opinion. I'd be really surprised to learn that you think she was murdered, because I certainly don't think she was murdered.
No, I'll be honest with you. I don't think she was murdered. Exactly. However, I'm gonna ask you a question based on this. From what you saw of the tunnel where the crash happened in Paris, if you had to describe that tunnel, could you describe it for our listeners here? Because I'm assuming many of our listeners have never been there. I have. And I'd like to see what you believe the tunnel was like based on the media description.
I don't know about based on the media description, because I actually saw pictures of the tunnel. So I'll be pulling it up from my memory.
Okay.
And it's just the tunnel, very much like, I'd say, Blackwell. Is it Blackwell or Blackwell? Blackwell tunnel in London on the M25. It's just your ordinary bog standard tunnel, isn't it? You go in, you're on, I believe it's what I'd describe as a dual carriageway, or maybe a motorway or something. So there's a barrier between your lane, which in France, I believe, is on the right, as opposed to ours here in England on the left. So you go in on this in the right-hand lane, but you're well separated from anything else in the left-hand lane. And I guess what you're saying is, what I couldn't quite work out is, what the heck did she hit the car?
Yeah,
that's one thing I didn't understand, but I suppose if you hit the wall, let's say you're drunk, and I believe there were two lanes in that tunnel.
Yeah, it's a dual carriageway, effectively.
So if you're driving on the right, and you'd be on the right because people overtake on the left.
Yeah.
So you're on the right, but you're tipsy and you're speeding, right?
Mm-hmm.
You look down, you look away, you forget something, you do something, you turn your hand, you turn your steering wheel to the left. So you leave your lane and then you hit the wall on the left.
Yes.
Well, if you're going fast enough, that's going to spin the car around.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll just have a catastrophic accident if you're going fast enough. And I believe that's probably what happened. Or maybe he was interfered with. To be honest, I think it was more likely that the paparazzi interfered somehow. Maybe a flashlight, a flashbulb, a motorbike that shouldn't have been there got in the way. He swerved to avoid it. That's what I believe happened. I don't think it was murder.
No. The person who was believing it was the MI6, for instance, and it was some sort of cover up by the monarchy and the MI6, because Dodi Fayed was, I think Dodi and Princess Diana were going to be engaged. That was the rumor. And there was also a further rumor saying that she could have even been pregnant. So the issue with the British monarchy was, could it be that the future king, who William obviously was already born at this point, would have had a half brother of Muslim descent? The theory or the conspiracy was that this was what the British monarchy didn't want to happen, and so they arranged for Diana to be murdered. And that was stemmed from Al-Fayed himself, who was Dodi's father. But he never brought up any evidence for those claims. Obviously, he was anguished that his son had died in the crash alongside Diana. So he couldn't accept, perhaps, that the crash was just a crash, so wanted to blame it on the British government, MI6, the monarchy, etc. So that's where the rumor first came from. And this took hold because when you look at the actual location, it's not like the Black Wall Tunnel at all. It's just like a big bridge. You're going under a big bridge. So literally, you're under for a second and a half, and then you're out the other side. So it's not like a tunnel at all. The way the pictures were shown via the media made it look like, as you rightly say, a tunnel that went quite deep and went further on, but it wasn't really a tunnel. I mean, I've been through it and underneath it myself, and it's not. You're under, like, it's like a longer bridge. So if you're traveling at, the speed of the road, you get through it in 1-2 seconds and you're out the other side. So it doesn't look like a tunnel, but that's side, that's a side issue. But so that itself looked really strange, because I must be honest, when we were informed that that was where the crash happened, we were on a coach, would you believe, going through, and there was 40 people on the coach, and everyone was dumbfounded as the shortness of the underpass. It was so short. Everyone on the bus thought, oh gosh, we thought it was bigger than this. So the way it was portrayed was far bigger than it was actually. But again, that's still a sideshow. The way she crashed, or the car crashed, did hit the middle part. It did spin. But what caused it to crash? There are a number of speculations, because what they found on the car itself was white paint. And they said that the white paint came from a white Fiat Uno. How they derived that from the paint, I don't know.
They can tell, especially, I don't know so much about France and whatnot, but for sure, the FBI and all that, they've got paint samples. When manufacturers make paints and things, even tires and whatnot, they send these things to the FBI, and they're all collated and collected and collated into a huge database, which the FBI uses for forensic purposes. Yeah. So they can definitely tell.
Yeah, and
so the other thing as well,
witnesses as well have said that they saw a white car at the time of the crash. However, that car was never recovered.
Yeah, I don't think we should worry too much about witnesses. They're unreliable at the best of times.
Yes, agreed. But when you see several of them say a white car, the ones who managed to see it, then you have to think, okay, they may not have got the make right, but the white car against the dark background, because it was dark, could have been an issue. But
I'm
again,
too skeptical for that.
Agreed. This is still weak evidence, or weak.
I know. I'm trying. I don't know when they were asked and in what sequence. Were they asked days afterwards when they had other people talk about a white car? Were they asked at the time separately? So we don't know answers to these questions. It's very hard. I'm looking at the tunnel now, and I can see that they're actually pillars.
Yeah.
I thought it was a smooth wall, like a black wall, and it isn't. So if you hit a freaking pillar at 130 miles per hour, that's going to be uncomfortable for everyone in the car. Yeah, so, there's that. Secondly, look, I put on my I'm an assassin hat. I don't know, should I? From time to time, I like to speculate how I'd do things. And if I want to knock
I suppose it gives you the way that if you could do it that way, you could make it plausible for an assailant to do it, I suppose.
Yes, I suppose. But see, if I was going to knock off Princess Diana on someone's orders, I'm not going to do this extremely peculiar public execution type thing. You can't even guarantee anything. Exactly. The timing is next to impossible. You have to know where they're going. You have to know when they're going. You have to have everything in place and ready to go. How do you know that there won't be a lumbering lorry in the way at the time?
Exactly.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You want to knock her off, you keep it simple. You go in, you put her underwater in the bathroom and you drown her. And then you have your own people investigate the death and pronounce it death by misadventure. That's how you do it. And nobody asks any questions because it's your people who will do the investigating. It's your coroner who's going to say it's death by misadventure. And Bob's your uncle. Why go through this horrendously complicated way of doing business? Number two, what on earth? Who cares if at this point ex-wife of Charles marries a Muslim and has Muslim kids? Who cares? And what guarantees is that the child will even be brought up a Muslim?
Indeed.
But more importantly, who actually cares? She was no longer at that point really connected.
The monarchy almost.
No, she wasn't connected to the monarchy. She had been cut loose.
Yeah.
And nothing. And the child wasn't going to be magically some inheritor of the estate. He couldn't become king or queen. No, there's absolutely no royal bloodline, absolutely nothing to do with anyone. And they could just have said nothing to do with us, bruv, and jogged on. So the motivation isn't there either.
Yeah. No, I'm agreeing with you. I think the link to a planned murder is very, very weak, in my opinion. It like I said, it did start with Al-Fayed, who was the father of Dodi himself, who stipulated this,
and had a lot of money and could therefore make quite a stink.
Yes, exactly.
Because money can help you do that. Other people who broke just wouldn't be able to make such a stink. And then one of the conspiracies with Sicily was she was assassinated, I suppose is the word to use. I don't know. That's a good question. Was she assassinated or murdered? Was she still a somebody, and therefore that was an assassination, or was she by that time a nobody, and therefore it was just a murder?
I think it's classed as a murder.
Oh, there you go. So the murder was organized by unscrupulous landmine manufacturers because she was going around and getting people to stop planting landmines. And if anybody knows anything about war and the military-industrial complex, that's just hilarious because nobody's going to stop them from planting landmines. It's too good for business. And even if she had gotten a few Western states to say, okay, we're not, I think she probably did, didn't she, in the end? And some Western states said they're not going to use landmines any longer. Doesn't stop the Ukrainians and so on and so forth from using them. So I think that's just fantasy, that idea. And then the other one was, of course, our good friend, although we don't know him personally, at least I don't know him, maybe you do, David Icke. who's out, and I'm going to just call it what it is, outlandish claim that Diana had seen Queen Elizabeth transform herself into a 12-foot tall alien lizard. a secret so devastating that she had to be murdered. What I want to know is, if Diana was murdered for knowing this, how come David Icke is still running around?
Yeah, exactly.
And by the way, how did he find out?
Yeah, exactly. How did he find out? That's just nonsense. Sorry.
And why would you actually? I've seen this guy speak, and he seems on the surface, he seems all right. It seems the sort of chap you'd buy a drink, in a pub and have a chat to. But chat with or chat to, I hate prepositions. But when you read something like this, you got to ask yourself, dude, what's the problem here? Yeah. How do you come up with this stuff? That's what I'd really love to sit down with you for 5 minutes and say, now tell me how you came up with that.
Yeah.
Did you
Where
hear
is
it?
the evidence? Yeah.
No, I'm not asking for the evidence. How did you come up with this? Did someone tell you? Did it come in a psychic communication? Because obviously you didn't see it.
No.
So how did you get? How did that idea come to you? And that's what I think that there might be that you say, well, I hear voices or something, which would explain things. I just want an explanation of how did you come up with a 12-foot tall, 12-foot tall alien? And how does this alien unfurl itself to 12 foot and then fold itself back in, into this poor 5'6", whatever she is,
Small, 5'5", I think she's the
Uh-huh.
queen. She's not very tall.
No, no.
Anyway, so what's your conclusion?
Absolute nonsense.
Yeah, I agree. It's a fabrication. Obviously, people were hurting. There were a lot of. I mean, I think the fact was the shock element of it, really, because everybody still loved Diana despite the fact she divorced from Charles, and everybody was on her side because they blamed him for his infidelity, and she was the darling of the royal family. For somebody as beautiful as she was to so tragically die, they wanted to pin the blame on something as opposed to it being an accident. And so because of the pain of Dodi's father, Al Fayed, people run with that, because people clasp or try to get some sort of answers, because accident seems too loose, too, not closure. It's an accident. It's like, oh God, why? We want to have an answer as to why the accident happened. And we don't like it to just be an accident. There has to be a blame somewhere, or we're a weird bunch, us humans. So for that to come about was, looking for excuses, I suppose, and reasons for her demise, which is such a shame. But I'm with you. I think there's no evidence to think it was malice or somebody in the government actually trying to bump her off.
Well, I have a few things to say, peripheral things.
Okay.
All sorts of things, really. Number one, I actually experienced this in real time. It was the middle of the night in Nigeria. I was back in Nigeria at the time, and I was coding. I had code I had to deliver that morning. I think, an application had gone funny. I had to fix it in the morning. So I was coding all night. And I had the TV on in the background, and about something like 1 o'clock, 1:30, like 2 o'clock, something like this, I was on Sky, because I hadn't learned my lesson in those days. I was on Sky. And the first thing that came in is, we're getting reports that Princess Diana has been involved in an accident in Paris. I was like, yeah. Because for people who are too young to remember, in those days, the news was basically the Princess Diana show.
Yeah, it was. She was in the news a lot.
She was and she was top story. I mean, she wears a new dress, would take precedence over like 50 people drowned or something. Seriously. It was ridiculous. And I was extremely fed up with this state of affairs. And I'll tell you who else was. Kay Burley. Kay Burley of Sky News. And she was very terse, if that's what I'm looking for, a tart, with news stories that involved Princess Diana. And in my opinion, she just didn't really like Princess Diana. But it could have been the same thing, because I had no personal animosity towards the princess. But I just didn't want to hear anything about her anymore, because I was just so fed up.
Yeah.
So when we first heard the news, I was like, well, who knows? Maybe she just tripped or something.
Oh, I see. You didn't know the extent of
No,
that.
you wouldn't, because I am confirming what you're talking about, just what you were saying a minute or two ago. Yeah. That you wouldn't have expected her to end her life that way. So the idea didn't even cross my mind that it was that. Then we heard, hey, actually, it's pretty serious. I was thinking, oh, okay, she's going to end up in hospital. Oh my God, that's going to be another how many hours of news story.
Yeah.
And then Kay Burley was brought in, I believe. She wasn't on. She wasn't on. I think, if I'm right, I think she was brought in, and suddenly she's there on camera. And I'm thinking to myself, this is maybe about 3:30 or 4, so a couple of hours later. I'm looking at this and thinking to myself, oh, hang on, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And then she puts on this somber face of hers. And this is somebody who, like I said, didn't like Diana. I mean, I'm not accusing Kay Burley of not liking Diana, but her demeanor was always, oh, no, not again. And she put on this somber face and said, I'm very sorry to have to tell you that the princess has passed away. I was like, what?
Yeah.
That's exactly what you were saying. It was, really? Wow, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
And this, in our last episode, our last show, I told you got many things to talk about. In our last show, I told you that I see the hand of a super intelligence behind the world, basically. I see it everywhere. It seems to me to be blooming obvious. One of the things that I think about is that Diana was famous, and if you like, I hate to put it this way, but I can't think of a better way of putting it. If you like, she came here to be famous. That's what she came to do, to experience fame, and it was given to her. But somebody else came, and that person took a humble path. Also famous, but took a humble path. And if that other person, if you had to speculate beforehand, when would be the best time to die so that you don't make too much of a fuss and people don't make too much of a fuss over you? I think you'd have to agree that it's the same day that Princess Diana died.
Mother Teresa.
Mother Teresa. And that's what I mean by when you start thinking about things like this, you think, hey. The funny thing is that people who poo-poo people like me, evolutionists, they believe in degrees of probability that are even greater than what I've just said. Right?
Wow.
Anyway, I don't want to start an evolution argument again, so let's not.
No.
Now, the next thing I want to say is, in looking this up, I came across what I think is a disgusting fact from Lord Spencer. No, sorry, Earl Spencer.
Linked to the same. Oh, okay, yeah.
Diana's brother.
Yeah.
Earl Spencer. And he was given an interview, and can you believe that people are trying to dig up her body?
What?
People are actually trying to break onto the estate, which, by the way, is not that far from where I live.
I know, it's not far away. Well,
yeah,
supposedly, but yeah, go on.
What do you mean supposedly not far away?
It's in the middle of the lake, isn't it? But
I mean her estate, the estate.
Oh, the estate itself. Yes.
Yeah, the estate. You can barely see the blooming island from the road, and I've never been into the estate. Yeah. So apparently, people are breaking in. They're trying to dig up the body, so they need 24/7. What do you call this? Security. Okay. What on earth do you want to do with the body?
I don't know. They want to see evidence of whether she was. I don't know what caused the death.
Oh, for goodness
I think
sake.
people still haven't got closure from it. This is what I'm saying. Because, like I've said just a few moments ago, we humans need to have a reason. We don't rest until we have a reason. We can't accept when things just happen. There has to be a reason behind it. Otherwise, we don't get closure, and it worries us. And this is a trait of humans generally, where the majority of people just cannot let it lie. They need a closure, a real answer that is then satisfying enough to allow that closure to happen. And when grief hits, that's at the worst scenario. We want to know why. And it's a very difficult trait. So people suffered grief, people that didn't even know her, people of the general population of the world, because they'd known her through the media. It's almost like a sister, a sibling, a mum, because of the amount of airtime that she got. And so when that was taken away so suddenly and so tragically, people feel a loss like they would a family member. And that loss then hurts enough to want answers to why. And a simple accident was not enough, and people are clamoring for a reason why, and hence why the investigation happened, and the blame was set on the driver, saying he was slightly intoxicated. They're looking for different closures to ease that pain, to say, that's why it happened, because they did it, and it's more acceptable that way. It's a strange phenomenon that we have.
Well, there is that, as you say, but I still find it pretty fantastic that people are trying to dig up the body, because you still have to prove, if you did take it, you still have to prove that that's the body that you actually got. And I've actually been to their family chapel, because their chapel is not in their estate. It's on a hill about 2 miles from the estate.
Okay.
And it's on a hill, and it's just a nice little sort of chapel. It's in a small area, which has got a cemetery outside. And when you stand at the gate and you sort of turn around, you look down upon the massive Spencer estate. I've forgotten what it's called, by the way. And inside the chapel, there's an area, I think I'd call it a catacomb, if that's the right noun for it, behind an iron grill with a padlock. It is locked. And this is where her ancestors basically are, in coffins and whatnot. So you see the coffins, but you don't obviously see what's inside, and they're lined up. And I would have thought that'd have been a perfect place for Princess Diana, but I suppose it would be less secure than where she is.
Yeah.
And it's become a place of pilgrimage. And this is the family's chapel. And I don't think they'd be able to get in if that was where Diana's body was. Because I think,
of course.
So they actually had to, and I'm rapidly reaching my end point, they had to put her on this island. But the way I look at it is that she's there. I mean, this is a very emotional kind of thing. It's not really based on logic. She's there on this island on her own, and all her life she had been on her own. You know, the way she was brought up, I don't know if you know about how she was brought up, and she was like the poor cousin, even though she was filthy rich, I suppose her family was filthy rich. For some reason, she was always being shipped around from relation to relation and that sort of thing. So she was
humble, really, in actual her demeanor and how she came.
Well, because the way she was brought up, she was always like an extra, like a fifth. What do you call it? A fifth. What was that expression? A fifth wheel. She was brought up as a fifth wheel sort of thing, which is why everyone was surprised when Charles, when they fixed her up with Charles. So I'm just saying that how sad it is that she was brought up that way, and then she ended up that way on her own on an island somewhere. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say about that.
Okay, I think we've done this one now. Okay, the conclusion is it's not that she just died because it was an accident. Okay, let's move on. The next one is who was responsible for the poisoning of Alexander Litvinenko. And just to give you a little background for those of you who are listening that don't know who that was, he was a former KGB operative, KGB FSB, which is the new name for KGB. And he was granted political asylum in Britain in 2001 after fleeing Russia, because he was quite a vocal proponent and against Russia. He called him a Russian mafia, and he lost his position. And this was when Vladimir Putin, who was the actual FSB director, who then went to say, actually on record, that he dismissed Litvinenko himself from the FSB. So Litvinenko was let's put it this way, he wasn't a fan of Vladimir Putin. And when he left and came to the UK, he then used to say bad things about Putin, who then obviously became the leader of the Russian Federation. So he was poisoned in 2006, and he eventually died, but the blame seems to have been put on the Russian state. But Tayo, I'll stop wobbling on and ask you what you think to this.
I don't know what to think. I don't care if my main man, President Putin, has people knocked off, because I think he's such a wonderful leader who is trying to fight such a great evil.
Can I ask you very quickly, sorry to interject here, why do you believe so highly of, because our listeners here may be hearing you say these words for the first time, can you just quickly share in a quick summary why you believe that President Putin is so wonderful in your eyes? Because I dare say a lot of our listeners may not agree.
I think it's so wonderful because he rescued his country from the clutches of the evil empire of lies, by which I mean the collective West. They were going to rape that country, and they weren't even going to use Vaseline. They were going to go in there and steal all their resources and do to Russia what they've done to Nigeria and countless other countries, which is as soon as you have resources they want, they install a corrupt government and they go in there and they make all these deals. It's basically what they did to Ukraine, turned into the most corrupt country, European country, and then just took all their resources. And he stopped all that. He went in, he got into power. He himself, unlike what everybody else is saying, is not corrupt. And that's why I like him so much.
Okay, cool. All right, let's get onto this actual story itself.
Ah,
You
right. So I
believe,
said I don't understand. I don't have a feeling like I'd give him a free pass. If he's knocking these people off, he gets a free pass from me. My problem is when you start looking at what the heck is going on in Russia, you just become very, very confused. You know, I got this other saying I like, if you're not confused, you're misinformed. And if you really understand what that means, it means there's no way you can figure out, you can never work out what's going on. Even in this year, 2022, right? We've recently had 6 Russian oligarchs. Well, okay, six of them are businessmen. 4 of them are what I describe as oligarchs, die mysteriously. Just in this 2022. A lot of people die mysteriously in Russia, and it doesn't all. If you try to connect them to President Putin, it doesn't happen. You just sitting there scratching your head, thinking, "What the heck is going on here?" So, with Litvinenko, what did he? Why would President Putin have knocked him off? Now there was this woman called this journalist. I forget her name, female journalist. And Litvinenko even warned and said he thought she was on some kind of hit list because she was publishing things. But when you look at it, it's like they attack President Putin, but they don't accuse him of being corrupt or something. It's always the people around him. So you could say to yourself, well, maybe the people around him are corrupt and they are a powerful mafia and they do arrange these debts. But there's no smoking. There is nothing that they accuse him of that would make him lose power, that would lose him power. So it doesn't make any sense. And then these Russians, they are Russians. These Russians who died this year in these very strange murder-suicide situations. 2 of them were found hanging. Another one killed his family and then shot himself, supposedly. These are all very peculiar, and they're rich, they're successful. It's like, why? What's going on? A couple of them are connected to Ukraine, and then again you think, oh, what's going on? And to be honest with you, Tony, when I'm looking at a similar case, the case of the Skripals, even though the Western intelligence and of course British intelligence in particular lay the blame on these 2 supremely dodgy characters who came from Russia. I call them dodgy because they came and they're photographing a cathedral or some weird whatever. But you then follow their GPS signal and it doesn't quite lead to Skripal's house. And you think, well, how do they manage then if they didn't even meet him? The deeper you look into anything to do with Russia and people dying, the more confused you get. So I really don't know what the heck happened to Litvinenko. That's I don't know.
Okay. The thing that you actually eloquently mentioned it. You said the word very, very cleverly, mafia. Now, a lot of people who claim that Russia's become a bit of a mafia state, with the head of the mafia being Putin. If you look at other examples of mafia organizations around the world, because many countries have their own mafia, which obviously stemmed from Italy originally, but the kingpin, the leader, they can't pin anything on him ever. They all the things they bring the leaders down on are insignificant things from past history. They cannot pin anything on the head of the mafia organization. It's always tenuous at best. So you've actually made a good point that Putin himself never gets the blame. It's always the people around him, because he doesn't expressly say the things you're saying. He just can do it with a nod and a wink. So he's never said it, but the people close to him understand what he means, and they arrange it. And they have secondary, third, or fourth level people who are far enough removed, who can do the bidding, and then they then can't be implicated because it's like, well, it's not us, we give them autonomy. Do you see what I mean? And this is how organizations in this manner work. So you can't pin the blame on Putin, but it's the same as the situation we've got in the UK to some degree with Boris, where, I mean, he's a fool in my opinion, but that's a separate subject. The things that went on under his watch, that's how he gets the blame. And the same with Russia, it's under Putin's watch. So the things that are happening have been under his watch. So ultimately, he may not have been the one that gave the order, but he did the nod or the wink originally. And then the people beneath them took out the orders that were implied, let's put it that way, from the top. And that's how this is happening. So in the case of Litvinenko, let's move it back on point. He died of a poisoning. And the facts that are here, he died of polonium-210, which was that poison. And it does go back to the first instance of the teapot, which was in the hotel, where they met with the Russian people, those two Russian agents. So the amount of polonium-210 that was discovered on that teapot that he drank from was enough to eventually kill him off, because apparently you just need, you know, a small piece of size of a piece of grain of salt is enough to knock you off. So he ingested way more than that, and obviously his demise happened shortly after. But it does seem odd that they would use a substance like polonium-210, which is also in the case of the Skripals, who was a separate incident. This is a really high grade nuclear product, which is only made in Russia. So it does make you question the KGB, or what they're called now, the FSB, why they would use some product that would eventually link it back to the state, because it's plutonium, you know, it's like used in nuclear weapons. Why wouldn't you just use a substance which is more readily available, maybe not as damaging or dangerous, but still could have the same effect, that then wouldn't link you back to your state? Because it's almost like they've done it in such a manner that it links back to the Russian state, but because the order didn't come directly from the top, they can say, well, we do give autonomy to various departments, and they're the ones that instigated this. But it's also to scare other people who are out there who may be saying bad things about the Russian Federation, to be wary that, oi, don't do this, because it doesn't matter where you are in the world, we'll get you at one point. So I don't know whether this was a scare tactic, that they used Litvinenko as somebody they wanted to bump off to show others out there not to be chastising or say bad things about the Russian Federation.
Well, I'm a facts and evidence man, and you're not giving me any facts or evidence. All you're doing is you're joining up the dots, and you're doing so based on your own bias and dislike of President Putin. Since I don't have that bias, and since I don't dislike the man, all I'm seeing are dots, which I'm saying I can't connect. To me, it actually makes more sense if you talk about a fundamentally lawless state, in which state actors, no, that's wrong, in which actors who are deeply ingrained in state organs do their own thing. And by do their own thing, I mean they are corrupt, they make money, they created all these oligarchs after the fall of the Soviet Union, and anybody who got in their way would be up for the high jump. And which is, I think it makes a lot more sense, because there are too many disparate people involved. There are people, these Russian oligarchs, they're with Gazprom. What have they got to do with with Litvinenko. What's Litvinenko got to do with Politskaya? I think I found her name, by the way, the journalist who was killed. Anna Politskov. Their names are so difficult. Politkovskaya. Anyway, whatever. Yeah. You see, they don't connect. But if you think about an amorphous nastiness of corruption, then that cloud of corruption would have different endpoints, which would have different outcomes for different people, rather than one central intelligence, the President Putin's directing, and defending a position. So I just go, something is happening, but what? I don't know. I refuse to get involved. I simply don't know what the heck is going on.
Yeah, I'm sure your love of Vladimir Putin seems to be blinkering your eyes to some obvious elements here. There are some facts and evidence. There's no dispute on the fact that he was poisoned. That's fact. He was poisoned, and the trail, because polonium-210 leaves a trail, goes back to that teapot, and he drank from that teapot. So that's facts and evidence. And the other two also had a trail of polonium-210. So that's facts and evidence. Now, the bit that's missing, you're right, is the link back to the Russian state.
Yeah.
But polonium-210 was only made in and used and processed in Russia. So there's the link to Russia. So that's the link.
You're just not understanding what I'm saying. I'm saying Russians did it. But the Russians who did it, and not only but, the Russians did it, and those Russians are very powerful elements within the Russian state security and other Russian centers of power.
Absolutely, I agree.
Well, right. So that doesn't mean Putin did it.
Hold on.
That's what I'm saying.
We're not saying Putin did it. We never said he did it.
No, I've been up to, so that means we're now getting two separate lines altogether. I thought you're trying to put all this into the hands of President Putin and say that President Putin ordered these assassinations. Didn't you say with a wink and a nod?
Yes.
Didn't you use that expression?
I did.
So who's winking and who's nodding and for what purpose?
It's Putin, because it.
Well, exactly. And I'm saying no, that it's got nothing, that you can't go that far. You've got zero evidence. That is pure supposition on your part.
It is. Because there is no evidence.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
I'm saying, this is what a lot of other people who are critical of the Putin regime is, he is like a mafia boss. Remember, he was head of the FSB, former KGB. You don't think he knows a trick or two? He knows how to keep himself clean of avoiding any, pinning stuff on him. Of course he does. They know every trick in the book. So when he gives an order, he may write something down which looks perfectly legitimate to anyone else. But when somebody reads it and says, I'm living a wonderful life now, they know, we have to bump him off. You see what I'm saying? It's the wording that you can't then pin on the leader. That's how the mafia work. You cannot pin anything on a mafia leader.
Look, you are a victim of, not even a victim, you are the perpetrator and the victim. That's called circular reasoning. He did it because he can do it. That's circular reasoning. That doesn't make sense. You're saying, he had the training of a chap who could do this, therefore he did it. No, it doesn't mean that. I'm telling you that where's the link? Litvinenko, what was Litvinenko to Putin? What possible
we know that there's a link because he was very critical of him, and
so what? Lots of people are critical of him. I sent you a cartoon not too long ago of President Putin, very skillfully made to look like a hound dog. Do you remember it?
Yeah,
and there are millions of these cartoons and things running around. There are people in Russia who seriously don't like Putin. They're not all dead. But what the heck, man? Seriously. I mean, at some point, you've got to realize that your suppositions are the problem. You're starting from he is guilty and then looking for reasons.
No, I'm saying show
show no, and then you're trying to, and then when I try to pin you down and say, no, I'm not saying that, and then you say, well, wink and a nod. So actually, you're not telling the truth. You can't go around saying people are winking and nodding, and then when you're challenged, you go, well, I didn't mean that I'm winking and nodding. You said so.
Okay.
So you got to stay. You got to stick to the narrative, man.
Have people ever in a court of law ever been convicted with circumstantial evidence, but there's enough of it, even though the perpetrator themselves, if you ever go and say you haven't actually got the smoking gun of them doing the crime. However, there's enough circumstantial evidence that all adds up, that shows they were there, they were in the room, they were the only person there. You have to make that conclusion and go, well, it does, and people can be.
I mean, I wouldn't. I don't know.
You wouldn't.
Not enough.
Right. Okay. So what's your conclusion then? Because I'm mindful of the time.
My conclusion is I don't know what the heck is going on. You could say he did it. You could say he didn't do it. I just tell you that, honestly speaking, I genuinely don't. There's something going on. Who's responsible? I don't know.
To me, they did it. The Russians did it. And it was also a sub-message to show any vocal critics who are out there, oi, we can get you wherever you happen to be. Because if you think about it, they poisoned him in the UK. So they can get to anyone, anywhere. And that's the whole point. The point was they didn't use a substance that couldn't link them back to the UK, to Russian Federation. They wanted to use a substance in order to make that message clear. Because as we've touched on, they could have used a different subject, and there would be no, oh, he's been murdered, he's been poisoned by somebody, but who? And it's been using a chemical or a product that doesn't link it back to the Russian Federation, and it could be attributed to a rogue state, as you said, or to some gangland thing. But because it was using this polonium-210, it makes you think, well, why would the FSB be that stupid? They wouldn't. They would do it because they wanted to send a message to other critics out there that, oi, you are not untouchable because you're not in Russia. And that's what I think has happened. So he was poisoned by the Russian state, and it was for a secondary message to everybody else out there.
Quick question before we finish this. Quick question for you. How would you distinguish between the FSB doing something and people in the FSB doing the same thing? What is your test for discriminating between the two?
I think the FSB...
No. What is your test? Not what you think. How would you discriminate between... How would you discriminate? When you're looking at evidence, you go, oh, I know it's the FSB and not people in the FSB because of ABC. What is your ABC?
You can't do the ABC.
Exactly.
As a whole.
That's why
responsible.
That is why. Shop. No, that is why you're going too far. You can't tell me the difference whether it is FSB as an organization or bad actors in the FSB doing their own corrupt and illegal thing.
Okay. You have a head of an FSB, though, don't you?
Yeah.
So if something is heinous enough, you can sort of point the finger at the leader and say, well, hold on, this is terrible. Yeah, FSB have done it, and the leader of the FSB is responsible. Okay. So you can. It depends on what the issue is. Because this is one guy, and this was a former FSB agent anyway, it's viewed, okay, yeah, you gave the order to kill, but because it happens across the globe anyway by other organizations, they don't want to moan too far. They go, oh, FSB kicked it off. They know there's no point in trying to hang this out further. Let's leave it, because it happens in the whole world with different secret organizations of every country. So you can only push so far. However, had the FSB ordered a whole, I don't know, a group of people to be murdered in the UK, then there would be enough noise that would then go back to the Russian Federation, and then they would have to do, there'd be more pressure, political pressure, to actually find who it was. So it really is depending on what the issue is. And in this case, one guy former FSB agent. Yeah, got killed on British soil, but he was a vocal critic of Putin.
Maybe the head of the FSB doesn't want to ask too many questions because he knows what happened to Litvinenko.
Well, I think the head of the FSB.
You think?
I think.
Facts and
It's
evidence,
my opinion. I'm allowed my opinion.
Are you really?
He's totally aware. Yeah.
You live in the West, man. We're not allowed opinions any longer. Have you forgotten? Shall we move on?
Well, let's move on. Okay. Okay. Let's stop that one. I think it was. Yeah, that was my opinion. But hey, you're just not sure. Good. Right. Let's move on to the next one. Next one's really controversial, actually. And this was, did Jesus and Mary Magdalene actually marry and have children? Goodness me. I'll ask you to kick this one off. What do you think?
Yeah.
What's that mean? You're not bothered?
No, they didn't. No, they didn't have children. There were all sorts of, yes, the Gospels were written 70 years after Jesus died, for sure. But the people who wrote the Gospels met some of Jesus's apostles. And it's a bit of a reach to say that nobody mentioned the fact that he was married. There would have been nothing. In fact, the fact that he wasn't married is what is strange. Because let's remember that Jesus was actually a Jew. Okay?
Yeah.
He wasn't a Christian, he was a Jew.
Mm-hmm.
And in his era, and with his culture, he would have been expected to be married in his early 20s. And the fact that he wasn't married would have been the remarkable thing. No one would have batted an eyelid if he had been married. There's no good reason why he shouldn't have been married. There's no good reason why he shouldn't have had children. His brother was married, because we talk about his brothers. He had
siblings, didn't he?
Siblings, yeah, and their children and everything. So what would have been the big palaver if he had been married? There is no big problem. The reason nobody mentioned the fact that he was married is because he wasn't married. To me, it's just that simple. I think there's biblical evidence too, isn't there? I think.
What, that he wasn't married? No,
yeah, that he wasn't.
Never mentioned.
No, I think there's biblical evidence.
No, but what the other thing you've got to remember as well is that the Bible itself was put together later, but there was still a very patriarchal system in place. So they may have been mindful of putting Jesus in as being married, because even though if he was or wasn't, the female would have not been very prominent at all. So
yeah, exactly.
Mary Magdalene could have been his wife, but why would you mention it? Because it's not important in those days. Do you see what I mean? The female back then was really regarded as almost not a servant. That's not true, but she was the wife who would look after the children, and that would be it. So to mention somebody like Jesus has been married would have been almost irrelevant. Why would you need to mention it?
Well, because they mentioned other people's wives. Who was so and so, the wife of so and so, Lot's wife. All these, there is countless reasons to say it. Then he left his wife and he moved to Galilee. Just telling you that, look, he was so committed to his ministry that he left his wife and children and he went to Galilee. They don't say that. He went to Galilee. In fact, what they do say was that he left his mother, didn't he? Isn't that what they actually say? It's in the Bible. In my faint memory. He said he left his mother and he went to Galilee to preach. Suggesting that he left his mother alone. So nothing to do with the wife. And then, like I say, there's so many other instances in the Bible where they say so-and-so is the wife of blah, blah, blah. And instead of running around saying Mary Magdalene, why not just say Mary, the wife of Jesus?
I think.
What is Mary Magdalene?
Because isn't there an implication by the Christian faith to say that Mary Magdalene had been a prostitute?
Well, you see, that's another thing. Why would he have ended up with a prostitute? Let's be honest.
She repented her sins.
Sorry?
So it repented her sins.
Yeah,
so
okay.
Everyone's accepted, isn't it? That's
well, maybe that'd have been a bit of a hard sell, I think, even in those days. It's a bit of a hard sell even now. But maybe he was radical and maybe he wanted to do it. That would then be a talking point. Instead of sweeping under the carpet, it'd be, look, he is so holy that he made her pure with his holy love for her, and he married her and he cleansed her. That would have been, if I'm a PR man, that's my spin.
Yeah, but maybe that was too big a leap for the people they were trying to.
Well, it's a bit of a leap to say that he's God's son. So frankly, that's, if you're going that far, I mean, let's be honest.
What? That would be more acceptable.
He did get crucified for it. No,
said.
Really, he got crucified for saying he was God's son. Okay, so let's not say it was acceptable. So they nailed him to a cross for saying that. Okay. Yeah. So actually,
people would they still followed him after because they followed his teaching.
Did they really?
Well, they did because
no, they didn't really. If you want to boil it down to brass tacks, Christianity exists because of Paul of Tarsus, not because of Jesus. To be honest. And the Gospels were collated and collected, like I said. The Gospels were written 70 years after Jesus died.
Yeah.
And they were collated and collected in 325, was it? 325 AD by the Emperor Constantine?
Yeah, and he put the Bible together.
Right, exactly. Frankly, if it wasn't for Paul, who went around and started all these churches all over the Middle East and in Greece and whatever, if it wasn't for Paul of Tarsus, I wouldn't have Christianity today. So anyway, to get back to the point is just that, no, I think they could have sold anything in those days and made it a point of honor and so on and so forth. But it's just, shall I tell you something? Do you know where I believe most of these rumors come from? And yes, you're going to go, oh God, Tyler's back on his identity politics thing again. It has to do with women wanting to hone in on the action. There was no action with this 13 men, Jesus and his 12 disciples. There's no action. It's no female thing. It's Mary Magdalene, some side, what is it now? Side character. Okay, Mary Magdalene, yeah, okay. And she loved Jesus, and she was there when he died and whatever. All right, that's it. So they want to get in on the action. And then in the 18th century, is it? It's with the 18th and 19th, I can't remember what century, with the rise of the feminism and all that, all of a sudden it's like, yeah, he was married. It's like, really?
I think this all stems from part of these parchments that were discovered in 1945 belonging to the two Gospels, actually. These are the Gnostic Gospels from Thomas and Philip. These were not included in the Bible, but they actually...
Are those the ones you're thinking of?
Well, they're the one, aren't they the two that go on to describe Mary Magdalene in a better light? They didn't sort of imply that she was a prostitute. They actually referred to her as somebody who was his companion. They both referred to her as his companion, whatever that means.
I'll tell you one thing.
Say it was his wife. They didn't say that.
I'll tell you one thing. I'll tell you one thing, Tony.
Go on.
If my Nigerian upbringing in northern Nigeria, amongst very pious, so-called pious Muslims and Christians, if they were together, but they weren't married, in their eyes, she would have been a prostitute. Wow. I think the word is not prostitute, but that is how people, loose woman. Yes, okay.
Yeah.
If you're with someone, it's amazing. The woman is loose, the man isn't loose, but I think there's a reason for that. Anyway, so it's possible, but I'm just worried that the Gospels you're talking about that were found in Galilee, there's a name for them, and it's not what you said.
No, you're talking.
They're very famous. It's a very famous thing.
The Dead Sea Scrolls.
There we go. The Dead Sea Scrolls. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, I don't know if they were actually the ones I'm actually specifically referring to were in 1945, and they found them in Nag Hammadi, which is in the Egyptian town. And so, yeah, I don't know whether they're part of the Dead Sea Scrolls or not, or whether they're in the collective. But that's a separate topic for another day, because certain elements of the Dead Sea Scrolls were made available to the public, but some have been kept behind closed doors by the Catholic Church. So
people and their secrets. I hate people and their secrets.
Indeed. So that could be a show for another time, whether or not that's why is the church keeping those hidden? Does it undermine?
We should write to His Holiness the Pope
Wow.
and say, look, we've got this podcast and we demand to know.
Okay, I mean, I'm mindful of the time. We've gone way over the time. I don't know whether you want to continue on a longer show for this particular one to get the last topic in, or we end it here and do this one at another time. It's really.
I think we can do this at another time. I mean, it's all I've got. I think you're referring to whether Harold Wilson was a Soviet spy.
Yeah.
All I've got is a harangue of Americans. That's where I'm headed with that. I'm going to lambast America.
Yeah.
You might not want to.
Well, we could lambast America. I'm of the same opinion as you. I don't think there's enough evidence for this. There's some questions and raised eyebrows for sure, because he did go to Russia on many occasions, and he built up a British trade delegation with them, with Harold Wilson, yes. And so there's a tenuous link here as to whether, when he became prime minister after that sudden death of the previous Labour leader, which again was sort of okay, and he succeeded him, so Wilson became prime minister the following year after they won the general election. So yeah, it's very tenuous, I'll be honest. Although the MI5 did keep a file on him, by the way.
No, they keep a file on everybody, don't they? Mention. If they don't, the Americans will. Do you know who I think is a double? But the person is still alive. So I'm going to have to say, in my opinion, and I'm going to have to say it's alleged and there's no proof. I think Gorbachev was a Western spy. Was a double.
You're going to have to,
Well, it's my opinion, because I was watching what he was doing at the time, and everything he was doing just played into the hands of the West, and he never really got anything out of it. And he wasn't incompetent. Boris Yeltsin was drunk and incompetent. And that's why the West got so many concessions out of him. But Gorbachev was not. And he basically just dismantled the Soviet Union, and very rapidly and more or less in an uncontrolled fashion, that allowed there to be so much chaos that the West came in and took everything.
The West didn't come in and take everything. That's the thing. They tried, but they didn't succeed. So
they took everything up to the borders of Russia.
Well, that's separate. That's not direct.
They would have if Boris Yeltsin hadn't died and Putin hadn't taken over.
I'm not so sure, but that's a topic for another show.
Yeah. It's kind of a segue.
Let's summarize, because we didn't actually get a summary here very quickly. Did Jesus and Mary Magdalene marry and have children?
Nah.
No, I don't think there's enough evidence to actually say that too.
Nah.
And secondly, was British Prime Minister Harold Wilson a Soviet spy?
No, we know why it began. It began because of an American who was very upset that Harold Wilson didn't, what was it he didn't do, Tony? He didn't do something the Americans wanted him to do. Angleton, the CIA counterintelligence chief, wanted Harold Wilson to get him involved with the US in Vietnam. And Wilson said, "Naff off." The first rumors about Wilson being a Soviet agent started after he told them to naff off, and came from the CIA, from the office of this CIA guy, who, by the way, is being described as a right-wing lunatic. So,
See, the thing I don't like is, I mean, this is a side issue, but around the same lines, is the fact that the US want to have friends on their side that follow their narrative. If you don't follow their narrative, they just don't like you anymore, and that's not a friend, in my opinion. They don't stand and support you when you need the support. Well, I suppose they keep going back on the war, of the Second World War, but subsequently, since then, everything has to be their way of doing stuff as opposed to everybody else's. Do you see what I mean? And that, to me, I don't know.
They've got
just an opinion, but
they've got an expression. I think it's an American expression. It's their way or the highway. And you have to ask yourself, why doesn't Europe stand up to them? Because quite frankly, what Germany has done to itself is Germany has emasculated itself by stopping that Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And a lot of people the kind of people I argue with online all the time have said to me, well, Tayo, you do realize that a man emasculated Germany, whereas a woman, Angela Merkel, told them where to get off. And I have to concede that in this particular case, they were right. Angela Merkel, the woman, stood up far better for Germany than Olaf Scholz.
Okay, that's a separate topic for another time. We have overrun, unfortunately, but with that, we have reached the end of the show for another week.